Welcome to episode 253 of the Brainy Business, Understanding the Psychology of Why People Buy. In today's episode, I'm excited to have Dr. Troy Campbell back for a fun flip on his Define and Apply framework. Ready? Let's get started.
You are listening to the Brainy Business Podcast, where we dig into the psychology of why people buy and help you incorporate behavioral economics into your business, making it more brain-friendly. Now here's your host, Melina Palmer.
Hello, everyone. My name is Melina Palmer, and I want to welcome you to the Brainy Business Podcast. In today's conversation, I'm joined by Dr. Troy Campbell, who was on the show back in 2021 talking about the science of cool. And you know that's linked for you in the show notes. He and I have gotten to be friends over the past 18 months or so, and when he pitched me with this idea for the show, I knew it would be fun, and I'm always happy to have an excuse to play around with Troy, so this was an easy yes. So, what exactly are we doing today? Troy is here to showcase his Define and Apply framework, something he does with clients in his role as chief scientist at On Your Feet and has done in the past with his work. And where's he been in the past? Well, he has been with Disney, Netflix, and Nike, as well as a professor at the University of Oregon. Instead of just telling us about Define and Apply, though, we're going to walk through and experience it together. And he suggested that he be the one doing the interviewing, with me as the one answering the questions today. This isn't the first time we flipped the script on the show. There are 2 other episodes out of the 250 that we have here where we've done this before. One was with Nikki Rausch called Ultimate Pricing Confidence, and one with Michael Bartlett from when my first book, What Your Customer Wants and Can't Tell You, came out. Both those episodes, as well as my first interview with Troy and all sorts of other related content, are waiting for you in the show notes, which can be found within the app you're listening to and at thebrainybusiness.com/253. All right, I guess it's time for me to hand over the reins to your host for the day, Dr. Troy Campbell.
Hi, I'm Troy Campbell, and I'm here on the Brainy Business Podcast doing something we do occasionally here, where we flip it up and make your host the guest. So I'm here with Melina Palmer. And hey, Melina, how you doing?
Oh, great to be here, Troy. Thanks so much for having me.
It's a fantastic show. You should check it out. Every episode's worth listening to.
Oh, thanks.
So on this episode specifically, we're going to do something that I really like to do that is called Define and Apply. And what it is we deeply define ideas to be able to powerfully apply them. So on this episode, we are going to deeply define one idea from your book, What Your Employees Need and Can't Tell You, Adapting to Change with the Science of Behavioral Economics. And we'll apply that, of course, to the workplace, so you can know how to better do it there. But then we'll also broadly apply it to other situations so you can get more color. It can be more deeply applied. And then we'll have, if we have a little bit of time, we'll have a lightning round of additional define and applies. And the other reason I really wanted to do this was I really like when Melina gets the time to just talk in depth about things. And if you aren't in one of her Texas A&M classes or a part of the Brainy Business Club, maybe you haven't heard her talk in length about one of the ideas from this book enough. So that's what we're going to do. You ready, Melina?
Always. Let's do it.
Okay, so the principle that we are going to spend time defining is my favorite from your new book, and it is called the burnt popcorn principle, or at least I added the word principle to make it sound fancy. So let us start defining this, and then we will apply it into the workplace. So what is this, Melina?
Yeah, so burnt popcorn is really the aspect of priming when we're talking specifically about change management. In my framework for change, which is the same one I use for pricing, which is called It's Not About the Cookie. In the pricing side, the scent of the cookies is what draws people in and gets them excited. And in the case of change management, I use this example of popcorn as a scent that can either be really glorious and helpful in the same way that that scent of the cookies is, that it can be enticing and draw people in, but sadly, more often than not, communication comes off as burnt popcorn. And we've all been in the office when someone has burnt a bag of popcorn, and it is all that anyone can talk about for the rest of the day. That scent can linger for hours or sometimes days. And every meeting starts with, the side gossip and conversation about who did that. And I bet it was Melina. She reheated salmon and broccoli last week or whatever, a whole thing. That's all anybody can talk about. And it just derails everything. So it's a really good analogy to be able to think about if your communication is coming off as burnt popcorn and just making it so everything is going to be more difficult and people will be less focused and kind of rebelling against you, and the ways that you can be finding those burnt popcorn moments to change them. And that can be, email subject lines, can be the language of an email. It can be the time of day that you send something or the way you pose something in an actual meeting, the framing you use, all that can be really part of that burnt popcorn experience.
Awesome. Well, as a person who began his college career as a creative writing and poetry major before switching over to behavioral science, I love the just visceralness of this imagery, right? We have burnt popcorn in the kitchen, in the workplace, and as you say, it's going to linger. And so this one thing is going to linger, it's going to prime, it's going to affect things, it's going to affect people's minds, it's going to affect how they pay attention to things, it's going to affect how they talk to each other. And so let's go through and break down a couple of the things in the workplace that maybe you don't realize it, but you are creating burnt popcorn. So let's talk about that email. I think you've talked about this idea, we need to talk, or emails like that. Yeah.
So the kind of quintessential moment for me, and the main one that I put in the book, and when I talk about this, is from a boss of mine. And I'd only been in this role and at this company for a couple of months. So I was still within that, first 90-day piece. And I got an email, and it was around 10 a.m. on a Thursday. And it said, "We need to talk, be in my office at 2," which is the scariest email of all time to receive. And I think everybody knows it's not like I saw that and went, that's interesting. I wonder what that's about. And then, spent 4 hours being productive. No, I spent 4 hours freaking out, looking at every project I was working on, every detail, every email, every person I might have been talking to. I'm sending text messages and stressing and all of that, just really kind of gearing up for what's to come in this meeting and getting ready for a battle, right? Ready to defend myself against anything that could come up in this meeting. And, I get gestured to sit down at 2:00, and the message is, "I just wanted to let you know I'm going to be out of the office tomorrow, and I put you as the contact in my email autoresponder." And that was it. That's the whole thing. We probably talked about lots of other things in that meeting. I don't know what any of them are. And I came to learn over time that was this person's style. It had nothing to do with me, and very much in a particular meeting that happened on Thursday mornings. These sorts of things where shoot off a quick email. My boss was really busy, lots of things going on, and, doing what was most efficient for her to get things done. But, what's saved will be generous and say 2 minutes of thoughtfulness on writing an email cost me hours of productive time. And as I say there in the book, when I was writing this and having to kind of put myself back in the moment, I felt my heart rate increasing. It was stressful for me over 10 years later writing about it because it had such an impact on me. And that's something that's important to know, right? Like the things you do, it's not just one email and they should know this thing, right? We have these visceral reactions to things. And in the case of that meeting, for one, thankfully there was nothing bad that we're talking about, or even a change that might be, objectively a good one. I'm not prepared to hear that. If there was something really big that was needing to be presented to me, there's no way I'm in the right frame of mind to be hearing that. And it's because of how this was coming off as burnt popcorn. So instead of saying, we need to talk, be in my office at 2, if that email had said, "Hey, I'm going to be out tomorrow. Do you have time to meet at 2 to discuss it?" completely different.
Yeah. So I think I love this example of it's so easy to create burnt popcorn. And then the other thing is you're talking about this like idea of priming. And I think that lots of times people read about priming and they think, oh, it's all these like small unconscious things only, or they really think of it, it's like what happens the moment right before the moment of importance, right? So you have this warm-up activity before you do it, which maybe we'll get to, which is important, but this really additional and lovely way in which you bring out through this example about how priming and related psychological processes can work is that this is poisoning the day. It is a lingering smell that makes the kitchen bad for a long time. So maybe we could talk about some other examples in work. Do you have any off the bat, or do you want me to play host and ask you ones?
Oh, fun. Well, I do know, some others that I've used as examples before that would be when you send meeting requests and you never use the exclamation point as important meeting or mark something as required. And then all of a sudden you do, and you don't have any explanation as to why. You can bet that people are going to start talking about that and be really stressed about what it's going to be about. I have also heard examples of people being sent NDAs sometimes 24 hours, sometimes, a week in advance of a meeting and saying you have to sign this before you come to this meeting next week, and then you'll find out why. Yikes. If there's another way to handle that, maybe that's not the dream when you look at, how you're going to be communicating. And again, it's easy to say it shouldn't matter, right? People should know it shouldn't impact them, but those sorts of things really do hang around. The other kind of example, and I think this was something you and I were talking about yesterday when we were prepping for the call, Troy, was not to be rude, but don't take this the wrong way, but you can just guarantee that they're going to be looking for the worst possible context of whatever it is that you're saying if you prime and set it up in the way, because even if you end up saying something really nice, all I can think about is why you thought it was bad, or I might think it was bad. And it just kind of ruins everything.
Yeah. And it's an oversimplification to say, like when somebody says, I don't mean to be rude, or no disrespect, that it's activating a fight or flight response. That might be a little overkill in describing what's happening, but it's something adjacent to that, is that we have a schema around this. Our heart starts racing, our attention might focus, our brain is going to be focused on all the other times that people have said things like this and the horrible things that have followed. And it's just not, it's not great. I love these examples, and why I love sort of this, what we're doing here. And we're going to just talk about these minutia of this seemingly mundane thing, is because these mundane things are what makes working in corporate environments utterly or somewhat horrific sometimes, right? It's these mundane actions that can create hours and days and weeks of stress that can be avoided with 2 seconds better of thought.
Yeah, those SIFs, those supposedly irrelevant factors to go from Thaler here are really important a lot of the time. And I like to look at that too, that with any of these things, I know people would say on the one hand, it can feel very stressful to say oh my gosh, I have to think about everything. How do I can't believe I have to think about all these things every single time. What a pain, right? But the other side is, for someone who wants to be a better communicator, to be a better manager, to make it so that people around you, whether they report to you or not, are more likely to be receptive to whatever changes you're presenting to them, to know that the bulk of that is within your control. And if you focus on a few little things that you can tweak and find points where you can make it so it's, hot, buttered, delicious popcorn instead of burnt popcorn, that it can be, in those subject lines, in the way that you phrase the email and the, name of that you put at the top of the agenda, whatever it is, those are things that you can very easily adjust and very quickly see a positive impact without having to, spend a lot of money or put in a lot of extra training or, whatever else.
Yeah. So somebody who came out of sort of the art space first, my strategy often with audiences was often like, I want to shake you up. I want to make you feel bad about what you're doing wrong. I'm just going to lead with that. And people came up to me afterwards and they're like, Troy, I tried really hard and eventually like I sort of got your point. And some of the times they definitely did not. But they're like, just why don't you just say something nice to us at the start? Like just don't start like you're a punk rocker. Like that's not the right thing in this academic or business space, Troy Campbell. So on that same sense, in presentations, I know that probably most people don't assault their audience the way that I did with metaphor and narrative and logical hypocrisy examples. But I think people do often start their business presentations often by starting with the worst stuff or negative stuff. Could you talk about how that is a proximal bad popcorn?
Yeah, definitely. So I teach a class that's called Creating Better Presentations. And of course, the BE is capitalized on that, as it should be for behavioral economics. I know. Fun. But that's its own sort of, like priming little Easter egg situation, right? For people that get it, you get it. So, with any presentation, whatever you are presenting, whether you are pitching for Series A round funding, or you are trying to get, budget for a new FTE, or you're pitching an idea, or just sharing a report of what's happened over the last year. It doesn't matter. You are presenting information. You're always trying to get the other people to buy in on whatever idea you are selling them, even though you don't have, necessarily money exchanging hands in that way. And this is, again, the same framework of it's not about the cookie coming in here. So when it comes to a presentation, what I always encourage people to do is to think about where you want people to be at the end. If only one thing comes out of this meeting, presentation, pitch, time on the stage, whatever it is, what's the most important thing that you want at the end? And if I'm standing on a stage giving a keynote, that is different than if I'm pitching for someone to work with me or whatever it is. But you need to be thinking about that and who the audience is and where they're starting, where you want them to go, and what the right stories are and what the good arc is along the way, and how you want to be drawing them in to help lead them down the path, that you want them to be on. And what happens often, like you were saying, one, we have just a huge amount of overwhelm where people feel like they need to give all the information about all the research and the data and the things they looked at and what won't work and why you tried this, and just numbers, stuff, to then make the recommendation at the end, and that like the big reveal comes when you've completely mentally exhausted your audience and they're not ready to buy in on whatever it is you're selling them. And I really advise against that. Really, we want to know, what the recommendation is, and you can be alluding to that early on. In the case of, using a movie reference as an example, that's like the case of foreshadowing. You put a little something that's your, tasty, delicious popcorn up front, so that when you then reference it toward the end, we have this believability factor. We're like, oh yeah, like I get that because of this thing that you said before. That makes sense. And that could be in a metaphor that you use to then, you start at the beginning and then you tie it in at the end, or you reference back to a story, a shocking statistic or something from the beginning that works with the emotions you want for people along the way. I'm also a big fan of using really good images in presentations, not putting lots of charts with lots of words and tiny, tiny letters, but instead the emotion you want someone to be feeling. That's an opportunity for priming really, as well as you go through this story arc that you're taking people through as you go through these journeys really along the way. But if you just front load them with data and all the bad stuff and the problem and why these things didn't work and how we've done such a bad job and now I'm going to save us or something, it just is more often than not setting you up to fail.
Yeah. And you've come in the room to deliver hope, and you don't start with hope is odd. It'd be like if like Frozen, like is just Frozen starts with this like lovely sister relationship, and then that is awesome, and then that is taken away, and we know that the point now is the movie will try to rekindle when Elsa and Anna had this love together, with also this foreshadowing that this Olaf character is going to show up. And yeah, or it would be like The Matrix starting with just the depressing life of Neo without the tease of the Trinity scene at the start. It's like, oh, this is going to be a terrible movie about a man.
I hate this. That's, I always give the example, when I tell people, you can tell the story. That's the other thing too. People feel like we need way more there's a lot of detail. Detail can be really good. We need to include some detail and stuff. The right detail is helpful. Too many details gets us really bogged down. And we say, you can get your point across here. Again, what's the point of, why am I telling this story right now? What do I want them to feel? What are the details that support that? You can tell a lot in 90 seconds. And we're going to say, like, you don't get more than that for whatever the story is. And you have to pick your details wisely. And people will say, I can't tell a story. I can't tell what happened in this experience in 90 seconds. And my reference is always, and I don't know how long the actual clip is. I'll have to check. And perhaps but I say, have you ever seen the beginning of the movie Up?
Yep.
Because there's an entire lifetime in what is about 90 seconds with no words even. It's all just music, and we don't even hear them speak really at all. And I'm bought in, right? I totally know everything about those characters.
Yeah. As a person who teaches very advanced story tactics, I'm often very frustrated just how far a simple thing like the story spine, which is just a plug and play template that you can find on the internet that was invented by an improviser and popularized by Pixar, is in just getting you almost all the way there. Not all the way there, but it definitely enough for almost all casual business scenarios. It was this way, this changed, because of that, this happened, and because of that, until we're going to do this, and then things are going to be okay. Just fill in all the blanks.
Yeah. We don't have to be reinventing wheels all the time, right? And you don't need a full hero's journey for your presentation. That's one thing too, when we look at those stories. But again, look for what might be, just bringing it back to that burnt popcorn. Do you want people to feel bad? And sometimes you do need to have a shocking statistic that is gonna shake things up and really hit people. And that's okay, but you need to know why you're using it and how you're resolving that and what the power is. Don't just pick a bunch of bad numbers and never resolve or have a reason for why you shared them. Yeah.
Sort of moving into sort of beyond just employee examples. I remember one time a very, very infamous moment in my family is someone came and literally said, everyone, sit down. I need to talk to you about your uncle. We all sit down. Your uncle was in a car crash. And then started just giving details and details and details and details. And all of us were too shocked to just say, get to the end. And eventually, after 2 minutes of dramatic, and your uncle is totally fine. I just wanted to let you know that. No, you didn't. No, you didn't.
You wanted the drama. You
wanted the drama. And we all literally, it ruined our night. Like, no one was good for the rest of the night when we spent this sort of, is my uncle dead? Is he seriously injured? And we did not shake that off until the morning, and even then further, even though it wasn't true, even though they solved the problem. It started in hell, and that hell stuck.
Right. That's also the idea of, so in this way, so this kind of anchoring on something really bad to make the thing you're sharing seem better, where they say, it's like kids that go to college, and it's like the girl that writes the letter home that says, Mom and Dad, I'm pregnant. And then you tell the whole, and like he's, addicted to some sort of drugs, and he's, starting some job. I'm going to blah, 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 blah. Like, there's the whole story. And it's like, actually, I just needed to let you know I was failing chemistry. I'm not really pregnant, but like, aren't you glad that that's the thing now, right? Think about how much worse things would have been if this were the real thing. And like, you just need them to buy in on this, like, I'll get my grades up, I promise. Sorry, right? So some might argue that if you go in and you make the joke, let's just say you make the joke at the beginning and say, hey, we're merging. We're being acquired by a big organization and there's half of the organization's going to go. Just kidding. Actually, here's the change. Like, don't talk about burnt popcorn. And the thing that was the not true thing will not dissipate. Like we said, that is just everywhere. And people now are thinking about the idea of merging and losing jobs. And where's this, like, that must be rooted in something real somewhere. And it's just like, like, and again, there may be a case where that could be actually a good thing to present it that way. But I'd say, super advanced tactic. And I would highly recommend against doing that.
Yeah.
In personal or in business.
Some people will be like, oh, I'm thinking of doing my next meeting presentation like Bo Burnham's Inside. Have you seen that? And I'm like, no, don't. Yes, I love that. Don't do that. Don't do that. Again, I think one of the things I love the burnt popcorn is of sort of like this like meta construct of bringing lots of things together is that it brings this idea of cognitive limitations. Or cognitive focus is that if you give the brain this focus and then you try to change its focus, it's still going to be stuck on that thing in most situations, right? Like it's why like Disney spends so much time having you transition between the ride and where the park is because you need to literally get out of mindsets, even if they're good mindsets. All right, so let's go into the beyond employee situations. And so maybe we talk about a consumer scenario, either as burnt popcorn or warm popcorn. I'm going to just answer this because I want to tell this story really quickly, and then you can hop on. I remember I would go to these, concerts all the time when I was young, and I would have lawn seats because that's what I could afford. And lots of places, it's a big lawn. You feel so luxurious, even though you're the poorest person there, and you're on your blankets. And then we went to this one place where the lawn was smaller, and we got there earlier, and we got the best spot, and we spread out our blankets, and we put a cheese plate out there and everything. And then the person came up to us about 15 minutes before the show started and says, "Actually, here you only get a 4x4 space for you to sit in." And so all people had to do this. And again, we're just fuming through the first couple acts. And we were just like, and it was just this burnt thing. And it would have just been better if they would have hit us up early before that could have been burnt popcorn. It could only been stale popcorn or something like that.
Right. Where if it would have been like spray painted markers to show how much space you have, or like things that are kind of walled off in some way with string or something to show how much space each person has, versus like you said, you've laid out, you're all excited, you have this vision of what your experience is going to be, and then it gets ripped out from under you and you have to squish in. It feels so much closer now too, right? So yeah, the thing about selling stuff too, where this comes up a lot, I get a lot of really bad pitches. I'm guessing you do too. I think everyone does. And we look at all the, how many LinkedIn connection requests do you get? And you go, no, bye, right? Delete it immediately. But the thing is, the way that you think you would want to be communicated to, like what feels, where you need to hedge, where you need to add a little bit of extra in there, is that I know you're really busy, but like that's not good, right? Like you've reminded them that they're busy, or I'm sure that you may think that you don't even want to talk to me, and I know you don't know me at all. But again, like don't give me all that stuff. That's not useful. If you take the time to do the research and know who you're talking to and why, and you can communicate with them in a good way. There are people I accept, like, peek behind the curtains of life here. If there's a LinkedIn connection request that I get from someone that I don't know without a message, I will almost always accept it. When people write their weird stuff, like 50% of those, maybe not quite, but like there are quite a few where I go, ugh, like you're obviously going to spam me with stuff. Like you're just trying to sell me, and I can feel that coming off of you. You're radiating with selling you energy that I don't want. Right.
Yeah.
And so knowing that when you're coming in that strongly at an event or whatnot, a friend of mine, her name's Priscilla McKinney. She's been on the show before. She did a presentation while we were both speaking at a conference from Green Book in Amsterdam this summer, or I guess last summer by the time this comes out. But she was talking about how LinkedIn is your like cocktail party of social networking, right? And to treat it like, you're at the, going out for drinks at the cocktail party or whatever, and how you connect with people as you would in a in-person networking type of deal is what we should be doing on social media as well. And I think that sort of reference point in how you reach out to people and being way less aggressive and weird. If you take a step back and look at the last couple pitches you've sent to people, it's kind of, if you've never done it before, you may be surprised to see how off-putting your messaging might be when you're trying to hedge, especially when you're reaching out to someone that you think might not want to talk to you. It feels like a reach. We do really weird stuff that can definitely come off as burnt popcorn, to be sure.
Yeah. There'd be a great, if anybody is a psychologist out there, and you're young and want to put a BuzzFeed list up, I feel like a great BuzzFeed list would be like things that we have a schema that is the thing we should do in the situation, but like usually never work and sometimes make things worse. Mm-hmm. But because we just like have seen so many people do it and we're such, unconscious pattern following people, we just end up doing it.
Yeah, I have a friend that and I feel like it's mostly me sharing them, but whenever I get the ridiculous pitches, for one, I save almost all of them, especially the really bad ones. I always do screenshots of, or I have a folder of them in my email where I can, while protecting the innocent, I blur out names and things, but I keep them to show, like, seriously, these are the things that I've gotten. They're so bad, so terrible. So anyway, I have a friend that I always send them all to. We kind of have this like one-upping experience with it because they're comical. I got one the other day that was addressed to a dear sir. So that was fun.
Awesome.
Yeah. Like, you, dear sir, I'm a big fan of your work. Like, I'm going to guess you're not. Actually.
I keep telling people about you. I say, this guy, he's awesome.
Yes, for sure.
All right. Is there anything we want to put a capper on with this, or do we want to go to the uninspiring called lightning round?
Why is it uninspiring? I feel like we've just burnt popcorned your fun of the lightning round. Right there for sure. Well, a couple of things that I know. I don't know what's in the lightning round, so hopefully I'm not spoiling anything with this. A couple of things, you had asked me of some of my favorite things in the book that I don't necessarily get to talk about all that much. Is that part of the lightning round?
We are in the lightning round. The lightning round is just what every podcast does, which is just like, now here's 3 or 4 extra questions. So if you thought that part was boring, just skip to this, and these will be quick and good. You people without attention spans. So the first one is other principles from the book that maybe sometimes you just like to point out, maybe that are more unique to the book, or you don't feel have got the light of day as much, or you have an extra story to add. Other principles.
Boom, lightning round. Okay, so with that, I would say, I think for anyone who's ever written a book, or you write a lot of content or whatever else. Through that process, there's a lot of little glimmers of fun that I at least like to include into stuff. And I think you see this from different authors too, where there's a little thing that will make you laugh, a little nod to, Zoe Chance. One of her books was, she had a chapter that was 9 3/4, which as a Harry Potter fan, love it, right? Like I get it immediately and I think it's really fun. And so those sorts of things I had said, there's one piece in the book where I talk about how for a Wizard of Oz reference there, saying that Glinda may have been a good witch, but she was a really terrible manager. And in that way, the explanation or kind of the point of this little sort of random comparison point that more made me laugh. I remember sharing with my class at the time where I had finished writing that, like the day before and felt really good about it. So I said like, hey, this is what I wrote. Is this just me being totally ridiculous after I've been locked up and writing for too long, or is this actually good? And they liked it, so it stayed in the book. But essentially so Glinda knew everything. So
I'm going to interrupt.
Yeah, go ahead.
Because I feel like you've just actually given us two principles. The one you're about to talk about and that other thing you just said, which is add glimmers of fun. And like so many people, when they're trying to do presentations or they're trying to teach or when they're trying to make even like reels or TikToks, they think that they need to have this long story, as you talked about, amazing stand-up routine or artistic storytelling that is Bo Burnham-esque. And you can get a lot of distance with just a couple clever little jokes, a slight reference, a colorful page, a little turn of phrase. It can be enough, especially if you're trying to do just general communication and you're not trying to have a viral or Academy Award winning story. I love that as a little lightning round bit. Now you have added a glimmer of fun with the phrase about being a good witch but a terrible manager. Now, what does that mean in practice?
Yeah, definitely. And one thing that I will note when we add fun and humor, which I'm a big fan of, and like you said, a little like joke that people will get, and some people get it, and it's a lot of fun. I will say one of the things that a lot of people turn to for humor, and if humor is not your thing, that's fine. You can have a reference that people will get and just sort of feel smart about, which is really great. When you're not great with humor, a lot of things that people will lean to is self-deprecating humor. And in the same burnt popcorn thing that we kind of started out talking with here, I really advise against that, especially when you're trying to position yourself as an expert on whatever topic that you're sharing on. If you're cutting yourself down, how's that supposed to go well, in the overarching goal of what you're trying to achieve? So try to use humor that's not attacking yourself or the company. It's probably not going to work super well. So that's that.
I think we could add what you just said again to like the schemas, right? So like people constantly cut themselves down. One of the reasons I think that we actually believe that is because most all the time we have models of communication. They're like the most successful people in the world. Right? It's a billionaire or somebody who has 7 million followers on Instagram or an actor in the Marvel Cinematic Universe. And of course, when they cut themselves down, that's a whole lot different than you, who's already sometimes in a lower power position, pitching to people above in a higher power position, cutting yourself down.
Right. And then, as the person that's being pitched to, and you go, maybe not, right? It doesn't feel great in that scenario. Yeah, definitely. Great point. So in the Glinda situation, or if you're a fan of Wicked, as I am, that would be Glinda. With this, so she knows everything that's coming and just says, follow the yellow brick road. You know where you're going, follow the road. There are a lot of monsters and things along the way, and where Glinda, we know, has her magic bubble and she's able to see where people are in the path. And, there are some things where she might have been able to say, ooh, FYI, like in this forest here, those trees are alive. So don't pick the apples, right? Like little tidbit of something for you to know before you get in there. Or other stuff, right? That could have been problematic that Glinda could have seen and been able to share. So one piece being, if there would have been this kind of broadcast message at some point to say, hey, for everyone, FYI, those trees are alive in the forest, you get to a point where people who are maybe already just past it are going to be really annoyed that you knew that thing and didn't tell them in advance. For people who are dealing with something else, right? Like I've got flying monkeys attacking me. I don't even know what that's about, right? I don't care about that thing yet. It's not well timed. And when you're already in it, there's too much. And if you would have tried to share all the things up front, though, kind of going to the other side, then I don't even what? I'm just going to stay here. My house is here. Like, I don't need to get to Oz after all, right? I don't need to get to the Emerald City there at the end, because it's not worth all the things you're telling me about. So that's like we're talking about in presentations, giving all the details of the bad things along the path, but it'll be, shiny when you get there, not good. Doing a blanket announcement of something that's at a totally random time for different people on your path, because not everyone is taking the yellow brick road to get to the Emerald City, right? There was a red brick road and some people are traveling by magic bubble or by flying monkey. You don't know how they're getting there necessarily. But if you give the wrong, different messages at the wrong time for people, it can just feel like you aren't thoughtful. You don't care enough about them. So knowing where people are, where they're going, and the right points where you can be giving those little nudges of encouragement or a little bit of feedback or a little bit of support before they enter into a scary forest, is something that you can be doing as a manager to help people to have a better, journey on their way to the Emerald City.
Yeah. It's sort of like how when you're teaching someone in sport, you're like, there are 100 different things you should know about shooting a basketball. But since you're just learning it, let me tell you 3 things. Aim at this part above the rim. Make sure you don't cross your arms and bend your legs. We got to get those first. And if you don't tell somebody that and they see somebody else told somebody that, wait, you didn't tell me to bend my legs? It's going to be that. I also really like sort of the point that I know lots of people have made this in so many different ways, but I've never seen like a really just huge, wonderful portrayal of your example of good witch, bad manager, is that so many people high up in organizations were promoted because they had a skill, not because they were good at leadership. I think Planet Money did something on this. And the idea is that we often just excuse or we don't even kind of demand these people to be good at explaining or things like that. Because, oh my God, they're magic. They're like a witch with their engineering or psychology skills or consumer psychology skills, but then they don't have no management psychology skills. And that sort of just lovely thing. Like be good at magic, but also good at explaining things.
Right. Yeah. That and knowing that, not everyone is destined to be not everyone wants to be the manager for one. And like I talk about in the book, someone who is, your best engineer, and if your only option to be promoting people is for them to manage other people, look at what those options exist. But for everyone who does want to be a better manager, of people and like I say, influencing people who don't report to you, there are lots of things that you can be doing that can just make it that much easier for people to want to follow you, to listen to you, to have good conversation with you, to be collaborative with you. So many things become easier when you're thoughtful about how you present information and making it easier on others.
Yeah. Awesome. Well, let's head towards some sort of moral, maybe whimsical conclusion on this, which is that, you've written 2 books now, and you've written one on consumers and one on employees. And so you're a lot like me in the sense that you work in sort of these 2 spaces that behavioral science usually gets kind of categorized as consumer spaces. And if you tell anybody, oh yeah, I work in consumer psychology, they might think you're like manipulating them, but usually they're just like, oh, that's so cool. That's cool. I'm so interested in the design of Netflix and video games. Oh my God, that's so cool. That's so cool. That's so cool. That's so cool. And then you're like, oh, I work in the psychology of organizations and managers. And I've literally had people say to me, oh, like audible, that's bad. What a horrible life you have. And then they'll be like, oh, wait, so you spend like 40 minutes talking about how you should send an email? I'm like, no. We spend like 10 hours talking about how we should send emails. And people look down on that and they're like, no. But when you think about it, these are the things that are every day. And right. And I loved when I do work for Disney and we work on things in the parks and stuff like that. But that's maybe for most people once a year or less. For me, it's living in Southern California. It's more than that. But for most people, it's not. But for everybody, work matters. Just everybody, works matters. And if you get these things better, the banal badness of life can be reduced.
Indeed. Let's work on reducing the banal badness of life in all ways. I would agree with that. And, to me, and it's, paraphrasing Adam Grant here a little bit, but this everyone deserves to have a job that doesn't suck. And along those lines, it doesn't take a lot to make it so that things are better for those around you and for yourself. And if you can change just a few things and not add additional time pressure for deadlines that don't matter and not having lots of unimportant back and forth on finalizing what time the meeting is going to be and who's sending the agenda and a bunch of stuff that, we just don't need to have all that extra communication that makes it so we don't have enough time to be creative and to have fun and to engage with other people and to enjoy our jobs and do better work that makes us more engaged and happier to be there. I don't see a downside, honestly. And even putting in the extra bit of effort. And I know that where people may say, it was 2 minutes extra on that one email, right? But I'm so behind on emails as it is. I don't have time to spend an extra 5 or 10 minutes on every email. I'll never get anything done. But if you are, you have to start somewhere. The best time to plant a tree was 20 years ago. The next best time is right now, right? So if you do a little better on your emails right away and frame them in a way that makes it so there aren't a lot of follow-up questions, you could reduce, very conservatively looking at the research, say 25% of the work, the time and effort that you're doing and everyone on your team. And if you imagine that 25% of all the stuff is gone, the Slack chats, the quick stop bys, the extra email clarifications or text messages just go away. I mean, how much better would that be?
Yeah. And I think that so much of the time when people are like, oh, I want to make the workplace like Disneyland, what they mean is they want to make experiences that are as good as the rides. And I'm like, no, you want to make it like Disneyland. I agree. But the way you want to do it is like how they make standing in line not suck.
Right.
And this idea of let's make work not suck before we make it this like place of quasi-religious joy is just such a thing to start on. It might sometimes sound less exciting, but it's going to arguably lead to larger jumps in people's well-being and joy that they get from life, which may not come from direct enjoyment in the workplace of, oh my gosh, I'm in the office. This is so good. Oh my gosh, the Zoom we were in yesterday. Oh my God, it was so great. No, it's like, I got off at 5 and I felt good about my life. And I went for a hike on Bishop Mountain at sunset. And it was great. It was great.
Yeah. No, definitely. And I think a thing about Disney, it's one thing to go to Disneyland. It's another thing to build Disneyland, right? So when you think about the science and all the precision and planning and forethought and layouts and all that went into making that the most thoughtful experience for people, that is something you can definitely learn from Disney in the way that you're building your organization. It's not all about Disney, right? Yeah. And going on rides all day. So yeah, definitely for sure.
Yep. And even Disney had a lot of failures along the way, and still sometimes do. Ariel was not a very good ride. I'm sorry. All right. That sounds great. Thank you so much for sharing your brilliant brain on this wonderful podcast, which has the word brain in it, so you know it's smart. I've been Troy Campbell on the Brainy Business Podcast, interviewing the brilliant Melina Palmer.
Thanks, Troy. Thank you again to Dr. Troy Campbell for joining me on and leading the show today. What got your brain buzzing in today's conversation? For me, I always enjoy learning, and having an opportunity to stop and reflect upon my own work and processes is really fun. Talking about our own work can be difficult, and it's often hard to see and know what makes us unique and what resonates the most with others who aren't quite as close to everything as we are. When Troy reached out to me and said that he wanted to interview me about my new book, What Your Employees Need and Can't Tell You, on the show, I knew it would be fun because, well, Troy is always fun, but also because I love the opportunity to hear what stands out for other people when they listen to an episode or read one of my books or hear me speak or anything else. For Troy, it was all about really dialing down on the burnt popcorn analogy. That's the first step in the It's Not About the Cookie framework when applying with change management. What I think is interesting about this is that it isn't the whole framework, but this one important piece, and it's such a critical part of the process. It's also one that tends to be the most difficult for people to implement and apply on their own on the pricing side of the framework for sure, when it's about the enticing scent of the cookies. So I don't remember, I've been trying to kind of rack my brain a little bit on the popcorn analogy, and I don't remember exactly how I got to this comparison and how many other analogies or stories I might have contemplated or played around with before getting to that burnt popcorn. But I'm so glad I did way back in 2018 when I first put a name on the It's Not About the Cookie framework and applied it to change management and shared it with you here on the podcast. Troy's define and apply process is about teasing out what you do in a particular area and figuring out why it works, getting to the details about what makes it special, and then expanding it into other areas that may seem unrelated, but are so relevant when you stop and make the effort. Troy's going to be back in the next several weeks to talk more, this time back in our more traditional format of me asking him questions. And he's going to be diving in on multi-narrative storytelling, his own special skill that he does with brands, and how it can be defined and applied by you, regardless of industry and in life and all sorts of other areas. So definitely keep an eye out for that. If you aren't already subscribed to the Brainy Business Podcast, now's a good time to hit that subscribe button to make sure that you don't miss it when it comes out. I hope you enjoyed this flip of the script episode and learning a little more about the burnt popcorn, priming, and the value of Troy's define and apply process. I know I had fun and learned a lot, and I hope you did too. Whatever you learned or thoughts that you had, please come share them with me on social media. You can find me as the Brainy Biz pretty much everywhere and as Melina Palmer on LinkedIn. And don't forget, there are important links waiting for you in the show notes for the episode, including ways to contact Troy, his first episode on the show, related books, and other content. It's all in the app you're listening to and at thebrainybusiness.com/253. And thank you again to Dr. Troy Campbell for joining me on the show today. It was a delight to chat with and learn from you. Join me Tuesday for another brainy episode of the Brainy Business Podcast. It's going to be a lot of fun. You won't want to miss it. Until then, thanks again for listening and learning with me. And remember to be thoughtful.
Thank you for listening to the Brainy Business Podcast. Melina offers virtual strategy sessions, workshops, and other services to help businesses be more brain-friendly. For more free resources, visit thebrainybusiness.com.